Hello and welcome back to Dr. Jordan B. Peterson's 12 Rules for Life. Today we have rule number 9. Assume that the person you are listening to might know something you don't. And that's a real possibility in every conversation you have. To start off with, I have page 237. Peterson talks about Peterson talks about how the present can change the past and how the future can change the present, and how you look back on things. You look back on memories, and when you try to remember things, even though it was like something terrible or hard, if you can look back and it ended well, then it may as well have all been worth it. It's how something ends that can change how you perceive something happening. And if it ends poorly, well, then none of it was worth it. It's just it's just in that perception of how you finish that certain thing. And it's sort of unrelated, because after reading this section, it reminded me of a TED Talk by a man named Benjamin Zander. He gave it in 2008 in Aspen, and it was the transformative power of classical music. And what I remembered from it was that he played a Chopin piece, as he called it. I thought it was like Chopin or something like that, but Chopin. He played like Prelude in E minor. And what I got from it was, I remembered him saying that nobody is tone deaf. If you were tone deaf, you wouldn't be able to tell that somebody from Texas to Rome. You wouldn't tell that there's an accent, or if someone picks up the phone. If your mom calls you, if you'd even have caller ID and you just heard her voice, you would know that that's your mom, or you could know that that's your dad, or whoever's calling you. You can tell the difference between the tones. So I remember him explaining that. And then I also remember him playing the Chopin piece and him explaining how throughout the piece he leads you along on a trail, and you can go ba 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 ba, at the bottom, and that bottom is what brings you home. That the piece is over. And so Chopin gets you almost to the very bottom, one note before, and then he takes you somewhere else until he finally brings you home. And it reminded me of that TED Talk about how, you get really close to where you want to go, and then maybe you have to go off somewhere else, and then eventually once you bring it home, you get to come home, and you get to relax, and you know that that's the note that's bringing you home. If that you go on that long journey, and then eventually you come to a part where it's over and it's satisfied, your inner self and everything, it brings you home, then it can it brings you home, and it's well worth it. But then I rewatched the TED Talk, and while that element is in there, I had watched this TED Talk before someone very close to my life had ever died. And when he plays the Chopin piece, he asks you to remember that person that you loved very much, and to just listen to the music and to think of them. And I think, honestly, it relates even better now to this topic about listening to other people, because they may know something you don't. And the same thing can be said through music, especially classical music, as classical music doesn't have any words for you to latch onto. All you have is just the noises that you must grasp onto played throughout the music. And this time around, I did have people to think about that were very close to me in my life that I've lost, and it did make me feel a lot different. I can't say I remember exactly what I felt the first time I listened or I watched that YouTube piece. I think it was probably 5. I don't know. I think I was in high school then. So yeah, definitely over 5 years ago. And it's quite amazing what classical music can make you feel, just through the way that the music is played. And and how it can just rile up so many emotions, and you can Benjamin Zander even mentions you can feel what Chopin wanted you to feel, what he was feeling in that moment. And I remember after watching that YouTube video, I did get really into classical music, and there's Liebestraum by what's his name, that crazy composer. I don't know, I'll figure it out, but I found that piece and I love that piece. And anyway, that's a little off topic, but you can feel what Chopin wanted you to feel through this piece, and it's amazing. It's that the idea that discussion I was having before in I think 2 rules prior to this, about how an idea can be a living thing inside of you, and it can grow and spread to other people, and that's done the same way through music. If you truly listen to the piece and you just try to grasp on and just let whatever thoughts come to you as you're listening to the piece, that is the exact thought that the composer wanted you to hear and to listen. And so, instead of just like, oh, I like that melody, or I enjoy what I'm hearing. If you can really just listen and be a part of that music, it can change the whole way you perceive that piece, and what you feel, and your viewpoint from that point on. And it was a wonderful thing. I'll link it in the description, the TED Talk. And I suggest you give it a listen as well, and maybe get into classical music, because it is wonderful. It made me want to learn the piano, so I've been trying to learn the piano because of that. And okay. Page 240. Peterson is talking about advice. He mentions it in the first page of the chapter as well, and how advice is for someone to feel superior over you and to tell you exactly what they want to hear, and rather it's better to listen and to have a conversation, and we'll learn later on to meditate with the other person. And it reminded me of Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, the first book, when Frodo leaves the Shire, and he encounters elves. He encounters an elf named Gildor, and he wants advice from Gildor on how to proceed. He needs to get to Rivendell with this ring, and the Nazgul are chasing him. And he also, at that point, does he know about Rivendell? I think he knows that he needs to get to the Prancing Pony. I don't quite remember, but it's something along those lines. And Gildor essentially doesn't give him advice. He just has a conversation with Frodo, and Frodo tells Gildor, he says, people often say, do not go to the elves, for they will often say both yes and no. The elves never tell you exactly what to do. They just kind of offer some things to say in a conversation, and Gildor responds by saying that advice, elves seldom give unguarded advice, as advice is a dangerous gift, even from the wise to the wise, and all paths can lead ill. Or he's essentially saying that advice is a dangerous gift, and maybe you follow that person's advice and it doesn't work out, and then you can blame them. And it's better just to have a conversation with someone and to talk it through, and to try to understand your situation, rather than just taking on advice, because the other person may not know your full story. That's why you have to have a conversation to understand the other person's perspective, and maybe the person trying to give you advice has a different experience, and that's why they chose the path that they chose. And really, advice is a dangerous gift in certain situations, and you should never let someone decide something for you. You should just go to them and then speak with them about it, and then from there make your own decision. Okay. Page 242, Peterson's talking about how you have to think with yourself. It's essentially a conversation with yourself on either two or multiple sides of a position, and you try to figure out the conflict within yourself. I often found certain situations help me get in the proper mind for thinking, because Peterson says, and I agree, that not all thinking is the proper thinking of delving deep inside yourself and trying to understand. When I used to walk to school, it was about a 35-minute walk, and I often found that I was able to have very long conversations with myself and thinking about the world around me and my inner self and trying to understand what exactly I wanted. I also swam, and I found that swimming in the pool, as I could do it pretty much mindlessly, allowed me to just go off somewhere else and just think about exactly what I needed to think. I often found that I was able to solve my midterm questions in the pool. Obviously, I'd already taken the test, and so I would just be swimming thinking about the test, wondering if I got the answer right, or I couldn't figure out how to do this one problem, and then I would just be swimming in the pool, and then sure enough, I'd just be thinking about it, and the idea would just come to me. It would just pop right into my head, and then I would check the answers after I got the results back, and sure enough, it was the right answer. Or going for a drive is always a nice way to just get your thoughts out and to just really think. And so getting in the proper setting of one, thinking with yourself, is something important you need to find in your own life. And then also talking to somebody else about it, because you have that subjective point of view, and you need that audience, that common audience that Peterson talks about, to truly understand your inner workings. And now this is kind of sounding like advice, so you can do whatever you want, but I have just found that that's helped me out. How about that? And you can take what you want with that. And of course, there's probably other ways to go about it. I'm open to all suggestions. Page 244, Peterson talks about how his client just made the realization of the connection between his wife and his mom and his actions with his dad. And I just questioned how many people come to those realizations on their own. I mean, I guess they're talking out loud. I guess he's talking out loud to Dr. Peterson and trying to understand himself, and somehow he makes the connections on his own. And maybe it's possible for everyone to do that if they just talk out loud and truly try to delve deep. But I just thought it was, he puts that in as an example, but I don't know if too many people can make that connection within themselves. It is possible maybe, but I don't know. I have no idea. I'm no clinical psychologist, so I just thought it was kind of odd to put that in there. I understand what he's going for, but I don't know if too many people could make that connection. Page 247, when he's talking about having conversations with other people, whether you're trying to not compete with each other's ideas, but just have a conversation and get an understanding of either side, and maybe both of you can learn something from each other, and maybe one person learns more than the other. Oftentimes people are articulating these ideas for the very first time, so they can go on tangents and other things. But then when you practice this Rogerian method by trying to summarize what they say and get their approval, you have to allay and get rid and purge these side tangents to really make it concise and to try to fully understand what they're trying to tell you. It reminded me of actually this form. For the most part, I kind of write down, I annotate, I'm like, I like this, and this is my initial thought on it, but that's all I write. I don't write a whole lot there. And then I look at my annotations, and then I'm essentially just coming up with my ideas on the fly as I'm talking with you now, just to get my first thoughts. So of course I'm going to go on side tangents as I discussed already in this video. I'm going on a tangent right now, but it's a good way. If you want to practice something like this, I would assume this is a good medium. You're hearing me talk, you can try to understand my thoughts and then maybe form your own thoughts in this way, and maybe summarize what I'm saying. And heck, maybe you can even practice that in the comments. Try to summarize a chapter that I've gone over, the page that, not chapter, but a page that I've gone over, and try to summarize what I've said, and then either have a retort or add on to that or something. That could be a really good exercise, and not just for you, but even for me, if I go back and listen and watch and try to summarize what I've been saying. That could be a good way of starting that. Also, the Rogerian method I use quite a bit, especially with my girlfriend. If we have, a little argument, I do my best to truly listen to her, and before proceeding, I oftentimes try to repeat and summarize what she says, because if you're trying to come to a compromise, if you don't understand the other person's position and you're not acknowledging that, then you're not going to come to a compromise. You're just going to keep, butting heads, and nothing will get done. But to truly have a conversation, to learn something from the other person and see their side, you have to try to understand their side. And so I think that's a perfect way of trying to understand their side and repeating what they said, and to just be there in the present with them. Okay. Page 249. Let's see. Yes, Peterson is talking about how when you're having not just a conversation, but maybe a debate with someone, you're anxiously just waiting to refute whatever they're saying and have your side win. And oftentimes I don't like debates as much, because I feel as though in a debate you have to be quick with your response and just refute them right away. But that's no way in going about I guess that is a debate, but if you want to have a conversation, that's not a good way about going about it, to just be anxiously waiting to refute. And I guess I just don't like the idea where I have to just be constantly thinking of a way to pick up on what they're saying and just twist it around and make them wrong. That's no way of getting to an understanding and learning. So a debate is something that can be challenging for me, and I think I enjoy the conversation better, to try to understand their position and go about some way like that. Peterson discusses on page 251 the idea of public speaking, and if you just talk to a single person, it can make your feelings go away, but it allows you to see if their understanding is picking up on what you're saying, and then you can move on to the next person and the next person, and that's how you should lecture. And sometimes I do try to do stand-up comedy, so I feel if you can connect with the audience, obviously they're going to trust you more and want to feel more inclined to laugh. But maybe I'll try to focus in more on one person rather than try to scan the room all the time. Just speak to one person and then another, and maybe we'll see how that goes. And then finally, the last page I will be discussing is page 254 through 255. Peterson says, when you're having a conversation, you must meditate too, instead of strategizing towards victory. If you fail or refuse to do so, then you merely and automatically repeat what you already believe, seeking its validation and insisting on its rightness. So, what Peterson is saying, which I agree with him and we've already kind of discussed, is that if you're meditating with that person and you're trying to get towards victory, which would be understanding and maybe a compromise or just seeing the other side, you have to do that patiently and methodically, and not trying to lead the other person to fail and to to judge them. But you want to it's almost as if you're showing your care for the other person through your conversation. And if you can do that, rather than just waiting for the next moment to jump in and try to beat them at whatever you're discussing, then there's a real chance that you can gain another ally and more respect for that person. Okay, well, I guess that is rule number 9. For rule number 10, you must be precise in your speech, which I feel I have difficulty doing, especially in this form of medium, as I am trying to come up with things on the fly. I definitely use a lot of filler words such as and the occasional like. So I try to be more precise in my speech. I have been trying to note how many times I say because when I'm just like out there riffing, I say that a lot. So I've been trying to reel that in. Maybe this chapter will help me out. I'll see you next time.